So I was going to talk about the March for Life in Washington, D.C., but I'm sure it's getting all kinds of coverage everywhere in the media, right? I mean, we don't really need to talk. I'm sure CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and everyone, just constant coverage about how big the crowds are. I'm sure the Huffington Post is just on top of that, just all over that, right? Right? No, Tom Benson, you looked and you.
I don't think so.
No. I guess not. Okay. Yes, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. Someone on Facebook Live did point out that it is on Fox. Yes, I did just check.
Of course,
they're going to cover it a little bit. But
the only website I saw, and I may have missed the others, but the only one I saw this afternoon about 2 o'clock, 2:30 or so, was the Washington Post had a live video. And everybody that I checked with called it the March for Life.
Yes.
Which is what it was. Except for the New York Times. They referred to the marchers as abortion foes.
Of course they did. And I noticed that too, abortion foes. And I noticed it wasn't really the top thing. It was kind of down the page.
Yeah.
At least online, down the page a little bit. And from what I saw, the only reason it got any coverage at all, really, is because Mike Pence and Kellyanne Conway were there.
Absolutely.
And they gave speeches.
And it's a good thing they were there.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's probably the strongest support you've seen from an administration ever in terms of this. So, yeah, it was good to see. We're going to play, actually, some of what Mike Pence said because he had a lot of great comments. I have some abortion facts that we're going to get to. Some hope in terms of this. I mean, it's still disgusting how many babies we kill in this country every year for convenience sake. And that's what it is. I mean, you talk about rape, incest, or, health of the mother. That's such a small minority.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of these abortions are done for convenience sake. And we kill thousands of them every year.
Did you realize that abortions of black babies outnumber births in New York City?
Yeah. That's why that's a big reason why their population hasn't grown as much as it should have because of abortion. And, the founder of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, was big on stemming the black community with stuff like abortions. That was part of her plan. It was racist and unbelievable. But we are not going to ignore it here on Beyond Reason Radio. By the way, that is Tom Benson producing. If you want to call, we're on 6 to 8 p.m. tonight. If you want to call, you can call 407-916-5400. You can text to 23680. You can comment on Facebook Live. Just send me a friend request on Facebook. Or you can like me on Twitter or follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. By the way, I just got another comment on Facebook that said NPR played a segment, one segment on abortion.
Wow.
I'm shocked.
That's great.
I'm telling you, the big reason why any of that is happening is because Mike Pence was there speaking. Yeah. If he wasn't there, and by the way, I've seen some pictures. You can go on Twitter and other places and look at pictures of the crowds there. They're large. And this is something, the Women's March was a one-time thing. So being a one-time thing, you're going to have a huge crowd. But this is something that happens every year, and it seems like it grows in support every single year, which is a good thing. And, I was thinking about this whole issue, like I said, as disgusting as it is, it can give us a little bit of hope because it's one of those issues that's changing for the better. There's so many things in this. There's so many things going on in this country where it seems like we're losing the culture or we're losing the debate, whether it comes to homosexual marriage or transgenderism or even sex before marriage, anything like that in the culture. Christianity, less people are Christians than they used to be. It seems like we're losing the debate. But this is the one issue where you look at the stats and we're winning the debate. It is changing, and it's been changing for the past couple decades, but it's definitely getting better where more people are becoming informed and less people support the idea of killing a baby in the womb for convenience sake. So Mike Pence, we're going to play the audio here. Mike Pence was at the March for Life today, and he actually went there and spoke to the crowds. You know, a lot of times presidents, they'll send a message or they'll send a video or something like that, but he actually showed up. This is, people wonder why. How could Christians vote for Trump? Because he's not a Christian. He doesn't act Christian. How could Christians go out and vote for Trump in such huge numbers? This is a big reason why. Because, yes, Trump doesn't live the Christian lifestyle like he should, especially in his past. But he supports the Christian community in this country. It's extremely obvious that he does. And this is a great example of him supporting that. So Mike Pence spoke at the march, and he had some really good comments on this, and this is what he said.
More than 240 years ago, our founders wrote words that have echoed through the ages. They declared these truths to be self-evident, that we are, all of us, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 44 years ago, our Supreme Court turned away from the first of these timeless ideals. But today, 3 generations hence, because of all of you and the many thousands who stand with us in marches like this all across the nation, life is winning again in America.
So I really liked that comment in terms of life is winning again, and it really is fundamental rights. He quoted the Declaration of Independence there. Our forefathers enshrined in the Declaration of Independence that we have fundamental rights given to us by our Creator: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we cannot protect the most essential one of those rights, life, it can have serious problems for a society. Serious problems for a society. I have later in the show, later in this half hour, I have some very interesting stories on abortion, how people react when they actually find out how abortion is done. Some very interesting audio there, and just a lot of good stuff. But Mike Pence makes another good point in this speech. Here it is. Play the second part.
I've long believed that a society can be judged by how we care for our most vulnerable: the aged, the infirm, the disabled, and the unborn. We've come to a historic moment in the cause of life, and we must meet this moment with respect and compassion for every American. Life is winning in America for many reasons. Life is winning through the steady advance of science that illuminates when life begins more and more every day. Life is winning through the generosity of millions of adoptive families who open their hearts and homes to children in need. Life is winning through the compassion of caregivers and volunteers at crisis pregnancy centers and faith-based organizations who minister to women in the cities and towns across this country. And life is winning through the quiet counsels between mothers and daughters, grandmothers and granddaughters, between friends across kitchen tables and over coffee at college campuses. The truth is being told. Compassion is overcoming convenience, and hope is defeating despair.
I liked everything he said there. I really did. The first thing he said that I completely agree with is that I think you can judge a society by how they treat the most needed in society, the most vulnerable in society, the elderly, the special needs, and of course the young. And who is who is more vulnerable than someone in the womb, completely dependent on the mother for their life in the womb? That is the most vulnerable. And if we treat it as, well, it's an inconvenience and we kill it for convenience sake, that is a bad reflection on our society. I truly believe that. And it has much more, and I've talked about this on the show before, has much more ramifications than even the fact that you're killing a baby. The other thing I really liked, and this isn't stuff I heard at the Women's March. You know, we played Ashley Judd from the Women's March, and Ashley Judd from the Women's March, and what was that? It was full of hatred. It was full of vitriol. Nastiness, all this stuff. And yet, what did Mike Pence say there? Even though he acknowledged that there's a lot of people who disagree, he said we have to fight them with compassion and understanding and love, and we have to, it's all about helping those in need who are thinking about having an abortion. I think that's a good message for people. I guarantee you, at an abortion walk for life, you're not going to have vulgar signs. You're not going to have any type of anger or riots. You're not going to have all this other stuff that you see at, say, the Women's March, or some of these Black Lives Matter marches, or these anti-Trump protests. You're not going to see that kind of stuff at a walk for life. Christianity, I'm sorry, is a good thing for this country. Most of them are Christian. Most of this is fueled by the churches and Christians in this country. And the power of that message, I think, is a good thing for this country. Now, in terms of life is winning, in a way, they're right. The polls are showing that more and more people are against abortion every year. The rate of abortion has gone down. The support for abortion has gone down. That being said, there's still way too many in this country. In 2013, 664,435 legal induced abortions were reported by the CDC. That's the most recent year they have, from 49 reporting areas. The abortion rate for 2013 was 12.5 abortions per 1,000 women aged 15 to 44, and the abortion ratio was 200 abortions per 1,000 births. Now, compared to 2012, it did decrease by 5% and has been decreasing by a lot. And I have the stats here all the way back to 1970. It seems the peak was in the early 90s, where in 1990, for instance, it was 1,429,247 abortions in 1990. And so it's all gone, it's been pretty much going down ever since. And now it's down to 664,000. So some good news. But when you think of that number, you know, you think of like 9/11, for instance, 3,000, almost 3,000 people were killed. And it's the worst tragedy our country's ever seen. And that is a small number compared to abortions, compared to killing the most innocent of us. Now, there was a new poll that came out as well where it says a commanding 83%, this was a Marist poll, by the way, a commanding 83% of American adults oppose U.S. tax dollars being spent to facilitate abortions overseas. That's a good one. A supermajority, 61%, oppose tax dollars financing abortions in the U.S. A slim majority of Americans identify as pro-choice, but a 52% majority is at least in favor of limiting legal abortion to very rare cases, such as rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother, which covers the pro-life spectrum. An additional 22% say abortion should be illegal after the first trimester of pregnancy, leaving only about 1/4 of the respondents to embrace the Democrats' radically permissive stance on the issue. So it shows how we're making headways in this debate. How there's at least one thing in our culture, one thing in this country where Christians are winning, where a moral issue is winning, and where it's going to be good for our culture in the long run. I think this is something we can win in the long run. Wait till I play some audio for you, which we're going to play here in the next segment, of people that were interviewed and they were pro-choice, and then they saw how abortions actually happen, what actually happens when you have an abortion, and their minds change. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. You can also watch us on Facebook Live. Just like us on Facebook at WFLA Orlando. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
So this is Beyond Reason Radio, Orlando Smart Talk Radio. We're doing the show tonight, 6 to 8 p.m. But if you miss any of the show, you can check out the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, the Beyond Reason Radio YouTube channel. I posted a video where I gave the real Obamacare numbers. You'll want to check that out. It's getting a bunch of hits on YouTube, so you want to check that out and share with your friends. So we've been talking about, because we're not afraid to talk about it here, we've been talking about the Walk for Life. We've been talking about abortion because I'm pro-life. And by the way, I have people very close to me that have had abortions. So to say that I just hate everyone who's had an abortion, as bad as I think an abortion is, obviously it's not true. If we take that approach, we're not going to win this debate. But I like Mike Pence's approach, what he said, we have to win with compassion. And I think that is the way to win. And education, of course. We have to win with that. But I understand it's a tough issue. And I understand that a lot of people that have abortions don't necessarily take it lightly. But that doesn't make it right. That doesn't, especially when you're in like the second trimester and you're having an abortion. I can't even understand that. I just can't even understand that. So I found a video. Actually, this was pointed out to me because it was written up by Amanda Presaguacamo. We've had on the show before from the Daily Wire. Our buddy from the Daily Wire, Amanda, did this story on the Daily Wire not too long ago. And it showed a video that was done by Dr. Anthony Levatino, who was a former abortionist and a practicing gynecologist now. He teamed up with the pro-life organization Live Action to explain exactly how an abortion is performed through a series of videos with animated graphics. Well, Live Action took the videos and shared them with people. They found people, in different areas and shared them with people who said they were pro-choice. So they would go up to these people, they would say they're pro-choice, show them the video, and the reaction was quite amazing. And it shows the power of, informing them of the truth, informing them of exactly what happens. That's why, there was a law that was passed here where there was a 24-hour waiting period. There's been other people who try to pass laws that they have to see an ultrasound before they are allowed to have an abortion. That kind of stuff is powerful. That kind of stuff can really work. So we're going to play the audio here. We're going to play some of the audio from the video here. It's really interesting stuff from Live Action. Go ahead and play that for us, Tom Benson.
Would you consider yourself pro-life, pro-choice, or neither?
Pro-choice. Would you restrict it at any point?
No.
No. So all the way up until
all the way up.
So says she's pro-choice, is watching the video, watching the graphics of how it's done.
It's rough. Do you think now, watching this and from what you just said, do you still support abortions up to birth?
No, I don't think I support it here.
I think the person should have a choice.
She changed her mind.
Have an abortion or not.
Watching the video.
Wow, it's brutal. Does it change your mind at all?
It really did. Yeah. So, abortion shouldn't be legal.
It's your life, so it's your choice. And if you believe that the baby, that you don't want to have the baby, then it's your choice. So, I'm pro-choice, I guess. I didn't realize that, the baby was, doing that kind of stuff at such an early state.
Does this change your mind at all about abortion?
Yeah. I believe that's like murder right there, what I saw.
I believe it's
My
like murder.
My opinion is that it should be part of the woman's right to choose whether or not to abort her baby.
One word, your thoughts on what you just saw.
Inhumane or heinous, yeah. It does change my mind. Like, a lot of people just say, oh, like, abortion's okay, or it should be okay, but then I feel like a lot of us we're not really aware of what's the process of it and what's actually happening.
Would you consider yourself pro-life, pro-choice, or neither?
I would say pro-choice, definitely. I would consider myself. That was questionable. I didn't really realize. Yeah, that's how. A little more iffy for me. I don't know either way at the time. Okay. But definitely more controversial than my initial opinion.
If the women don't have the ability to be responsible for the child, it's maybe the best choice for her to do the abortion.
Kind of agree with her. I think it's people's freedom to choose whether they should have the children.
Watching the video.
I think it's so unhuman, and it's like changed my mind about abortion.
Yeah, I changed my mind completely.
Amazing stuff. So they go up to the people that are pro-choice, and not only do they, after they watch how the procedure's done, not only do they, question it, but they completely change their minds. Completely change their minds. In fact, you heard the audio there. One of them said, it's like murder, because it is murder. That's why. And another person said, wow, it's inhumane. Powerful. That's why we have to continue to do that. And it's funny, I've talked to people, libertarians and others, who say they're kind of pro-choice, not sure about it. They get extremely uncomfortable when you start talking to them about it. Because I think a lot of people who even say they're pro-choice, they know. They know deep in their consciousness, they know in their hearts what it really is. And, if you tried to show them pictures of an aborted baby, you try to show them procedures, anything like that, they won't want to look at it because they don't want to be informed of the truth because they know how vicious it actually is. But like I said, the good news is, like Mike Pence says, we're starting to win this argument. It's really starting to change. It could be my generation, the next generation, that could really, really make a difference in this area. And we have to fight it. Now I have an amazing, amazing story that I'm going to talk about in the next segment.
An analogy would be during tough economic times, if the neighbor across the street loses his job, that's a recession. If you lose your job, that's a depression. Yeah. So in other words, when something like this hits home,
right,
and not happening thousands of miles away, it's a little bit different.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. I completely agree with that. And I haven't even got into, a lot of people who have abortions, they have problems, psychological problems later in life. It's very serious. But I have an amazing story that I'm going to get into in the next segment of someone who survived an abortion and is alive today. Incredible story when you think about that. If nothing puts abortion more in perspective than that, I don't know what else will. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. You can watch us on Facebook Live as well. And follow me on Twitter at Beyond Reason R. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We got Tom Benson producing. You can text the show to 23680. Don't forget to send me a friend request on Facebook. I will accept it. Search Michael Yaffee. Send me a friend request. We've been talking about the Walk for Life. By the way, there's a lot of other stuff we're going to get to in the next hour. We have a whole nother hour of the show. Trump, of course, is doing a lot this week, has done a lot this week. We have to talk about that. We have to talk about his proposal for the wall. We have to talk about the tariffs. We have to talk, he wants to have maybe a 20% import tax coming from Mexico to pay for the wall. Talk about the ramifications of that. He's talked about torture. And we will also have the much anticipated, much beloved Trump, Beyond Reason Trump Twitter update. Because he's actually been going crazy on Twitter, which is always entertaining to say the least. But we've been talking about abortion, talking about pro-life, the pro-life march. And because of this, there was someone on the Fox News opinion page, which I found, it was written by Melissa Oden. And this is a way I think this issue can hit home for people. And it's extremely powerful in what this issue is all about. I mean, this is, well, let me just start reading it for you. An abortion is forced upon a college student against her will. Miraculously or unfortunately, depending on what side of the abortion debate you are on, the abortion fails to scald the baby to death over the course of multiple days, and she is delivered alive. After the baby is delivered, demands are made to leave her to die. Nursing staff defy this order, and she is whisked off to the nursery in the hopes that if other people know that the baby was born alive, she would have medical care provided to her and not simply be left to die. With the aid of medical care, love, and a healthy dose of a miracle, the little girl defies the odds and not only survives, but goes on to thrive, lasting no long-term health consequences of the abortion attempt or being born at approximately 31 weeks. There are a lot of abortions that happen at 31 weeks. After finding out accidentally as a teenager that she survived an abortion, she ultimately goes searching for her biological parents, her medical records, and the truth about her life. Nothing could have prepared her for the reality that the circumstances surrounding her survival were even worse than she knew or could have ever imagined. If it wasn't enough to find out that the abortion was forced upon her birth mother, she would ultimately learn that her own grandmother, a nurse, was responsible for the forced abortion and was there when she was delivered. And sadly, that it was her very grandmother who made the demand that she be left to die. And if all of that wasn't enough, the greatest secret surrounding the abortion would come to light. Her birth mother didn't know that she survived the abortion and was placed for adoption. She never knew until her daughter contacted her family, started speaking publicly about the issues decades later, and the great secret was brought forth to her. All of this sounds like a storyline of a movie, doesn't it? It's like a sequel to October Baby or a Lifetime movie. Except it's no movie. It's real life. It's the story of my life, is what she writes there. She said, there was a great struggle within me as to whether I would ever share my story publicly or keep it private. Looking back on it all now, I realize that if I would have kept my story private, my biological parents likely never would have known that I survived. And keeping my story a secret would not have done anything to help save the millions of babies who are aborted every year, and the women who make an abortion decision or are coerced or even forced into it, like my biological mother was. I may have had that abortion attempt performed on me in secret. I may have been placed for adoption in secret, but I was not meant to remain a secret. She continues on here. Abortion is a human rights issue, and I appreciate that the pro-life movement understands and seeks to educate our culture with the reality that abortion doesn't just end a life, it affects multiple lives. It changes lives. It changes relationships. I read a statistic once that every abortion affects 7 people. If there have been 58 million abortions in the last 44 years, and there have, then that equates to 406 million lives being impacted at a minimum. 406 million lives impacted. That number is difficult to wrap your head around. Yet if you look at the state of our world today, the general disregard so many have for human life, the angry, rhetorical arguments in support of abortion, Planned Parenthood funding, even within the pro-life movement itself, as we consider the work of groups like And Then There Were None, and the conversation of abortionists and clinic workers, that lofty number seems all the more palpable. As we approach the 44th anniversaries of Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton decisions, which legalized abortion throughout pregnancy, I ask you to remember that behind all of the statistics, behind all of the arguments for and against abortion, behind all of the peaceful marchers and every angry counter-protesters, behind all of the rhetoric, there are hundreds of millions of stories from women, men, and family members on both sides of the abortion issue. From doctors, nurses, and clinic workers who performed or assisted with abortions. And yes, even children like me who have survived abortions. Most of these stories will remain untold or told in quiet whisper privately versus out loud in public square. But all of these stories shape the lives of these individuals. Their beliefs about abortion, their vote in elections, and the pro-life or pro-choice activities they engage in, like the West Coast Walk for Life, the March for Life, or yes, even standing with Planned Parenthood and counter-protesting. Everyone has a story, or at some point in their life will have a story that involves abortion. And those stories have a profound influence. As we enter into 2017, can I encourage you to spend some time this year truly listening to someone else's abortion story? Whether you agree with someone's beliefs or you are vehemently opposed, can I encourage you to simply hear them out and be willing to have a conversation after that? You never know where a seed will plant and what it will cultivate later. When you are at the West Coast Walk for Life in San Francisco or the March for Life in Washington, could you say a prayer for the person that is counter-protesting, even if they are shouting obscenities or displaying distasteful signs or clothing? It says, as you can probably guess, my beliefs about abortion will not be changed by anyone, but I can honestly tell you that it doesn't stop me from listening to someone, from showing them respect, from thanking them for their willingness to stand up for what they believe in, from sticking out a hand to shake even when I know they are going to turn and walk away from it. Why? Why would I put myself out there with others who wish me better off dead? Because everyone has a story, and most are simply left untold. We would all be wise to remember that as the battle for life heats up. Think about that. You know, we some people look at abortion as like a medical procedure. But this is someone saying, I survived an abortion. If someone can say the words, I survived an abortion, that means an abortion possibly kills someone. The abortion tried to kill her because she survived it. And there are some people, like President Obama in the past, by the way, who thought that if babies survived abortions, they should be left to die. If it's not a life, then how can someone be left to die? That makes no sense. It's completely illogical. You can't be left to die if you're not alive. The fact is they are alive. You can't survive something if you're not alive, but they are alive. The fact is, it is a life. The fact is, we can't compromise on this. The fact is, science is proving that it's a life. And stories like this really hit home, I think, to a lot of people. So if you can find that, it was written by Melissa Ohden. It was on Fox News. I would encourage to share it. It's an incredible story. I doubt it's the only one. I bet you there are other stories like this. Amazing stuff. When we can have a culture. I mean, think about that. When she said those people would rather be, wish me better off dead. In some ways, that's literal. It's not just a figure of speech, because some people want abortion. Some people want those aborted babies to be left to die. That means this person writing this article, this beautifully written article, would be dead. And the other thing I liked about it is a lot of times you look at the March for Women, the Women's March protests, you look at all these other protests and vulgar, nasty things you're seeing. And what is she calling for? Love, compassion, understanding, like I said earlier. It just shows the stark difference. And it shows if you're with the Walk for Life, you're on the right side. 479-16-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Yes, I am back on the air. This is Michael Yaffee, your voice of reason, your voice of truth, in a world of beyond reason, in a world of too many not-so-truths, too many falsehoods, too many alternative facts, as Kellyanne Conway would say out there. She's never going to live that comment down. By the way, she's never going to live that down. So we have a lot more that we got to get to in the show today. In the next hour, I'm going to really start to get into the whole idea of a 20% tariff tax on imports. It's actually a little bit more complex than a lot of people realize. I was looking into it. There's a couple of ideas floated around out there on exactly what that means and exactly how that would be implemented. It's not as clear-cut as maybe a lot of people would think. And we'll talk about the ramifications of all that. We'll talk about what that would do to the economy. And is that Mexico actually paying for the wall then? Also, I mean, Trump has done a lot this week. 14, outside of even tweeting, outside of speeches, outside of everything else. He's had 14 presidential actions this week so far. That's a lot.
2 today.
Yeah, 2 today. Yeah. And I have a list here actually of things he's done here. Let's go through some of them and see how good and bad it is, because it's a lot of it's good stuff, and a lot of it's conservative. We've heard a lot of this debate about, well, how can conservatives be for all of this executive action? Weren't they against Obama's executive action? And it's such a shallow argument, because his executive actions he's doing within the law. Some of them are merely repealing Obama's executive orders. But the problem with Obama's orders, like on DACA and other things, is he was trying to go around the law. And that was proven by the court saying they were unconstitutional because he couldn't get stuff passed through Congress. And so he would go do things that were direct contrary to the written law. But the president can do executive actions. That's how he runs the executive branch. So there are executive orders that are perfectly legal. Conservatives are not just against executive orders in general. They're against unconstitutional executive orders. Now, if he ever does unconstitutional executive orders, I will be against them. But most of what he's doing is just sort of instructing the bureaucracies, which he is allowed to do as president, as the head of the executive branch, and telling them what to do. So it all started the first day. On the first day, he had an executive order that directed agencies to avoid imposing penalties on individuals and others who do not obtain health insurance or otherwise contravene the law. Another one is freeze on regulations. He put that out there. January 23rd, his first full day, he had a memo restricting funds for global health assistance groups that provide abortion services. He also withdrew from TPP, even though that was kind of unnecessary because we never actually became a part of TPP. It was never, that's something that has to be passed through Congress, and it never actually happened. And a federal hiring freeze, he has every right to do that. That's great. That's a conservative thing right there. The next thing, the next day, January 24th, he allowed access for the Dakota Access Pipeline. That's basically reversing an executive order from Obama because Obama restricted access. He shelved regulations to expedite infrastructure. That's just instructing the bureaucracy. The Keystone XL pipeline, approved that. That's basically just removing Obama's executive order on that. U.S. Steel for U.S. pipes, a memo directing the Commerce Department to develop a plan to use steel made entirely in the U.S. for all pipeline projects. That's a bunch of the America First thing.
Sure.
I don't exactly know how I feel about that, but it's not unconstitutional.
I wonder if there's going to be I'm sure there's going to be a court challenge to some of these, especially the pipeline ones.
There's going to be a challenge to everything Trump does, I think.
Yeah.
They're going to try to impeach him. Now, it won't work. You can't. There's no way. They will never get the numbers to do it. But there's going to be a challenge to all of this, I'm sure. And it will be lost because they're constitutional. Another one, an attack on sanctuary cities, an order denying federal funds to sanctuary cities, more than 400 cities and counties that offer some form of safe haven to America's 11 million undocumented migrants. The order instructs the Department of Homeland Security to publish a weekly list of so-called criminal actions committed by undocumented migrants and publicly announce which jurisdictions have previously ignored or otherwise failed to detain the accused individuals. Pretty good stuff. Build a border wall, an order calling for the immediate construction of a physical wall on the southern border for stricter enforcement of immigration laws. See, this is all within the law. Congress has already approved a lot of funding for a border, fence, a border wall, some kind of barrier. And so it's already within existing law. Extreme vetting. This was today, the 27th. Extreme vetting. Trump signed an order late Friday, the text of which was not yet available. and described it's like this. I'm establishing new vetting measures to keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the United States of America. We don't want them here. We want to be sure we are not admitting into our country the very threats our soldiers are fighting overseas. We only want to admit those into our country who will support our country and love deeply our people. So another executive order. And buildup of the military. Trump described another action signed late Friday, saying, I'm signing an executive action to begin a great rebuilding of the armed services of the United States, developing a plan for new planes, ships, new tools, developing resources for men and women in uniform. And I'm very proud to be doing that. Our military strength will be questioned by no one, but neither will our dedication to peace. We do want peace. Now, in terms of some of these things, he's allowed to do an executive order, but to get the funding, it has to be approved through Congress. So he will need congressional help on this. Now, in stuff like buildup of the military, I think extreme vetting and other things, he will get help from Congress. I don't think he will have a problem getting any of that passed. But a lot going on. A lot that he's doing. You know, you can't say he's lazy. Of all the criticisms you could say of Trump, I don't think lazy is one of them. So in terms of what he actually is doing, a lot of it's pretty good. Now, there's always a difference between what Trump does and what Trump says. So he says things on Twitter, he says things in speeches, he says things in interviews that get him in trouble, and some of them are not good. But then he actually does things. I guess Mike Pence and Reince Priebus and them are actually helping him implement these things, and they're like, hey, this is how you actually do it. And he's like, okay. So we'll see what happens. I have to talk about in the next hour about the wall. The big, beautiful wall. The big wall that Mexico's going to pay for. We'll talk about that and much more. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We have one more hour to go, and we will be right back. So this is the time during the day and during the week where people in their radios, I know they're in there, a lot of them are in their cars, maybe they have headphones on, they're for a walk, they're in front of their computers, wherever. They're like, you know what? I need a voice of reason. There is so much out there that is beyond reason. There's so much going on, so much noise all over the place. But you know what? I need a conscience in my ear. I need a voice of reason. And this is the place where they get it. This is Beyond Reason Radio, where I, Michael Yaffee, am your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. And the conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. And I'm joined by, producing for me once again, is the one and only Tom Benson. How are you, Tom?
So in the world of making a decision, you'd be the little white angel on the right shoulder.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, I'm not sure who the devil would be. Who would be the devil? Let's see. I'm trying to think of like the Keith Olbermann. There you go.
Oh, man.
So you got Mike. You picturing Keith Olbermann on your shoulder?
Pretty easy choice now.
You just go ahead and flick him off there, and you got me. Yes, I would be the little. That's a good one. Write that down, Tom Benson. I am the good angel on your shoulder. I like that. So we did a whole another hour before, another hour here. We're on Facebook Live as well. You can like us on Facebook at Beyond Reason Radio, or send me a friend request. Just search Michael Yaffee. A couple people have done that this evening, and I appreciate it. So we have to get into this. Trump says he's building the wall. Trump has an executive order to build the wall. And it's going to be a big wall, a big, glorious wall, believe me. Bigly, huge. I think my Trump's getting a little bit better. I think you have to get real nasally, and you get low, and he's going to be a big wall. But he says he put an executive order to get the wall built, and I'm excited about it. I mean, think about, it's talking about being the voice of reason. Think about the idea that it's controversial to build a border for your country, to have a border, a fence. think about that. Just go back to its basic elements. What is so controversial about wanting to protect the border of your country? Do you think it's controversial when your neighbor builds a fence to protect his house? Obama's building a big wall around his new mansion. And yet, we can't do it as a country? You know, he was called racist and all these vile things because he wants to build a wall? Think about that. It's just when you put it like that, when you put it down to its basic roots, it gives a lot of perspective. Now, some things have changed, though, because during the campaign, Trump was talking about who would pay for the wall. Here's a little bit of a montage, if you can get that ready for me, Tom Benson, of Trump all throughout the campaign on saying who's going to pay for the wall.
And Mexico will pay for the wall. They're going to make them pay for that wall. Okay, you ready? Who's going to pay for the wall? Who? I will build a great, great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words. Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
I will tell you that the United States will not be paying for the wall. Mexico will be paying for the wall.
We're going to build the wall, and who's going to pay for that wall? Who? And Mexico's
like
going to pay for the wall. Mexico's going to pay for the wall.
I will build the wall, and Mexico's going to pay for it, and they'll be happy to pay for it. Trust me, Mexico will pay for it.
Mexico will pay for the wall.
So Mexico's going to pay for the wall. We heard it over and over. By the way, I stand by my comment that, you know, Reagan was the great communicator. Trump is the great entertainer. I stand by that 100%. He is the great entertainer. He really, really is. So he said, Mexico is going to pay for the wall. We're going to make Mexico pay for it. And people probably thought it was going to be, remember that Saturday Night Live bit when he was on Saturday Night Live? And they did a bit where Vicente Fox walked in with a check for the wall and handed it to Trump. That was great stuff. So Mexico was supposed to pay for the wall. Well, something kind of changed in the past few weeks. Here's a couple examples of what Trump is saying now.
We will be, in a form, reimbursed by Mexico, which I've always said. So they'll pay us back? Yeah, absolutely.
That the country of Mexico will be reimbursing the United States for the full cost of such a wall.
Okay, so now it's a little bit different. Now it's Mexico's going to reimburse us for the wall. So we're going to pay for it. Now that we're going to build it first, and they're going to reimburse us. I mean, frankly, I don't really care. Let's just build the thing. I don't really care who pays for it. Let's just get it done. But he made it a big issue in his campaign, so you know everyone's going to harp on that. But it kind of changed again because Sean Spicer, his press secretary, was asked about this on Air Force One. And by the way, I don't think I ever remember like any press secretary of Obama talking to the press on Air Force One. Does anyone else remember that? I don't think it happened a lot. It's so funny watching that too because the press is on him, you know, with Sean Spicer on Air Force One, and then they're just Trump's like, "Come on into my office," and they're in Air Force One giving a tour. I just love it because it's just Trump's like, "I'm an open book. Here we go. Come on in." Now, I guess, you know, he hasn't released his tax return, so maybe he's not a full open book. But in terms of transparency in the presidency, there is some, I don't know, it's something refreshing about it, I guess. I don't know, that he's just like, yeah, come on in. They say, oh, he's not going to pay attention to the media. He hates the media. Are you kidding me? He loves the attention. And we're going to prove that even more later when we do the much-beloved Beyond Reason Trump Twitter update. We will do that later in the show. But Sean Spicer was asked about this, and this is what he said in terms of Mexico paying for the wall.
I think when you look at the plan that's taking shape now, using comprehensive tax reform as a means to tax imports from countries that we have a trade deficit from, like Mexico. If you tax that 50%, $50 billion at 20% of imports, which is, by the way, a practice that 160 other countries do. Right now, our country's policy is to tax exports and let imports flow freely in, which is ridiculous. But by doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall just through that mechanism alone. If you think about what a border tax on imports from countries like Mexico that we have a huge trade deficit does. That's really going to provide the funding.
So now it was Mexico's going to pay for the wall, then Mexico's going to reimburse us for the wall, and then all of a sudden now it's we're going to tax imports from Mexico to pay for the wall. By the way, I just got a text come in that says, Trump. Trump goes up and he says, who's going to reimburse us for the wall? Crowd says, Mexico. The texter said, yeah, not the same ring to it. Not as, it's kind of like when it used to be lock her up. And then Trump goes, we want to help her heal. And I'm like, that doesn't have the same ring to it as a chant. Help her heal. Help. No. So now, frankly, if you go towards this, a 27% tax on imports from Mexico, and they're saying, we have $250 billion dollars worth of imports. So you tax that at 20%, you get $50 billion. That's plenty to build a wall, that stuff. Here's the problem with this, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of other people say this, and I'm going to repeat it. Who pays for it? Mexico's not paying that. The American consumer's paying for that. When you tax an import, it's just going to be passed on to the buyer, going to be passed on to the consumer. And by the way, there's a couple, I was doing a lot of research on this, very interesting. There's a couple different ways this could happen. One way is you just have a direct tax on imports and 20% tax. Another way would be to tax the company's profits. It would be like another corporate tax. So you would get rid, right now you can tax, you can have a deduction based on the tax when you import or export. They want to get rid of the deduction on imports and totally have a deduction on getting rid of the tax for exports profits you make on exports. So you would tax the profit of the company based of the imports. So like if a company in America imports some products, makes so much profit, makes $100 profit, let's say, and you would tax 20% of that $100 profit, and that would be another way to do it. But the problem is, once again, is all of that's passed on to you. All of that's passed on to the consumer. But forget that forget that for a sec, because a lot of times I'll bring that up to people, and they'll tell me, well, this will be good because that means we'll be buying less products from Mexico and buying more from America. The theory goes, in terms of this whole trade policy of Trump, that if we have protectionism, that's what the theory of protectionism always been. You tax products that we import a lot. You put tariffs on to make it harder to get products from overseas. That it will, quote unquote, level the playing field, and more people will buy American, and that'll help grow American companies. That'll help create American jobs, and then less money will go overseas and all that. That's the theory that goes on. That's what I hear a lot of times. Now, that's not exactly how it always works because, for one, it assumes that economic growth will continue. If you have tariffs, it could be that just there's less economic growth in general. Because what's hurting American companies more than anything is not other ways around, is not other countries. What hurts is our regulations here, is our taxes here. So you talk about, we need to buy more American cars. We need to bring Detroit back. Well, a lot of American car companies, they're not just going overseas. They're also going to states in the South because the southern states don't have the union deals. They don't have the wage laws. They don't have the regulations. They don't have the taxes. So there you go. That's the theory on protection. I just got a text that says it's always been that way. You did not read between the lines. Don't be fake news. I'm not really sure what that means. You have to elaborate on that for me. But so that's the theory. But the problem is, like I said, but despite all the economic theories of this, despite all of that, let's go back to the essential thing that Trump said. The essential thing that Trump said is Mexico is going to pay for the wall. despite whether you believe that protectionism helps our economy or hurts our economy, by adding a 20% tariff, by adding a 20% tax, that is not Mexico paying for the wall. That is you paying for the wall. That is the American consumer paying for the wall. That's a lot different. So if we want to hold him to his feet to the fire in terms of, you can give the excuse, well, that's better for the economy. Fine, whatever. I'm going to get into that debate next. I've been talking about that this whole time. This whole idea of trade deficits, the whole idea of protectionism will help the economy, the whole idea that we're losing all these jobs overseas. The fact is manufacturing output is way higher than it was at the start of NAFTA. The fact is, I've went over all these facts over and over again. The fact is you should have the liberty to buy from wherever you want, so on and so forth. The fact is it's big regulations here, it's high taxes here, so on and so forth. That's hurting us more than anything. But despite all that, he said Mexico's going to pay for it. Now, frankly, I don't really care who pays for it, but just be honest about it. Why he made the deal that Mexico has to pay for it in the beginning, I'm not really sure. It wasn't really necessary, I think. I think people will be happy as long as the wall gets built. So what do you guys think about that? 407-916-5400, text to 23680. We're going to go deeper into some of the ramifications of this, ramifications of tariffs, ramifications of protectionism, and frankly, I don't think it's conservatism. That's what I think. 407-916-5400. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com, a place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
Got a penny in my pocket, and I found a 4-leaf clover, and I put it in my locket, wished on all the stars above me, then I caught the nearest rainbow, gonna find someone to love me, gonna find someone to love. Well, I tossed a lot of nickels in a wishing well and saved the fortunes that the fortune cookies tell.
Here we go.
I got a lucky penny and a mustard seed, but a warm and tender love is all I need. And I want a love that lingers and is stronger through and through.
What are we listening to here, Tom Benson? Fine. What? Okay, Tom. You're gonna have to explain this to me, Tom Benson. What were we just listening to? What was that?
Here we go.
Got an angel on my shoulder.
Oh.
Got a penny in my pocket.
Gotcha. I am
the angel on your shoulder.
Yes, I am the angel on your shoulder. I am the voice of reason, the voice of truth in the world. That I missed that part when you first played. I am the angel. I like that, Tom Benson. Mark that. Keep that. I like that a lot. So we've been talking a lot about the wall. The wall's coming. The wall's going to be built. I still think it's funny how watching people react to Trump. You go on social media and you watch it live. Facebook, whatever, and Trump speaks, and you watch the live feed, and you watch a live comment, and there's just so much anger towards him. And I'm like, what are these people going to do when he actually ends up being, not a bad president? What are they going to do when he actually ends up being a decent president?
Well, that's going to drive people crazy because that's going to prove he's going to prove them wrong.
Exactly. And I think, and it's, I swear sometimes when Trump says controversial stuff, he does it on purpose. He just does it to drive people crazy because it works. He is a legitimate troll on social media. So I don't know. I find it all fascinating. So we're talking about the wall. And here's the thing about walls. This is why I agree with Trump. I remember when Trump made his first speech on the wall and everyone was criticizing him. And I'm like, it was one time where I really supported him. And I was like, why? Why? Why can't we have a border? And he talked about, well, they're bringing drugs. Yes, they are. Where do you think the drugs are coming from? That they're bringing them. They're bringing rapists. Yes, that is actually happening. There are stats that prove that they're coming here. And gangs. There are a lot of gangs on the border that come from Mexico. So what's the problem here? And he got so criticized. He said, he said it was racist and all this stuff. And I didn't understand it. I support him. But the thing is, walls work. In fact, you know who has a pretty good border wall and it works extremely, extremely well? Israel. Israel has a really good border wall.
And Saudi Arabia is building one.
Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Now, why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know.
They're building that because of the refugees. So Saudi Arabia doesn't want them, but, we have to take them all in. That was another executive order that Trump did, actually. Limiting the refugees. And we keep hearing, well, we don't need to do that. What? We act like the history of this country, we've just had open borders and open immigration. And that we've always been a country that just lets everybody in. There's 10 billion people in the world, and we just let them all in. Come on in, no matter who you are. Except that's not true.
And you don't hear enough about it being an insult to those who came in legally.
Well, that's true. And that's why, that's why more Hispanics actually supported Trump than they thought, actually supported Trump than Romney. That's why, there's so many interesting things. But in terms of the border wall and border fences, there actually are some places on our border where there are fences, where it actually works. And you know what they found? Because there was funding for some of these fences. It was on the San Diego border, for instance. They found that it worked.
Mm-hmm. They
found that illegal immigrants crossing borders at those places went down dramatically. The Israeli wall, because they had a lot of problems with Palestinians and other countries and terrorists coming in and trying to bomb them. So they built the fences. I don't know if it was necessarily a wall. It was a kind of wall, I guess. They built that and they found that it worked. They found that it dropped. It dropped immediately. I'm trying to get the facts here. I'm trying to get this story up here. There was an interesting article in Conservative Review that was written actually a couple years ago, but it just proves the point. They reposted it about how fences work. And here's an example of this. One of the most pervasive arguments against a border fence is the nursery chant, show me a 20-foot fence, I'll show you a 21-foot ladder. And that's what a lot of people say. They can just get over the fence. But here's where there are some fences and where it actually worked. In terms of following the first wave of illegal immigration post-1986 amnesty, which primarily came through the California-Mexico border, Congress passed a bill in 1996 to require construction of a double-layered fence in the San Diego corridor along the coast. You can see a picture of the fence with razor wire and everything. By the end of the decade, apprehensions fell by 95%. By the end of the decade. Not 10%, not 25%, not even 50%, but 95%. Now we'll talk about other places where there are fences, where there are walls, and where it has dropped considerably. In terms of Israel, it's dropped considerably. In terms of other parts where here's the stats on Israel. Between 2000 and 2005, suicide bombers infiltrated Israel almost on a daily basis. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed and countless thousands wounded, the equivalent of 42,000 fatalities and hundreds of thousands wounded in America if take into account population size. The situation was desperate, so what did they do? They built a fence, a double-layer barrier with a security zone in the middle, similar to what they have in San Diego. Suicide attacks perpetrated by Arab terrorists declined by 90%.
There you go.
After building the barrier. 90%. 1%. The fact is, it would work. And you talk about, well, illegal immigrants taking jobs. That's one aspect of it. But there's also national security aspects. There's also the drugs. And that's a big reason why Mexico doesn't want us to build a wall, because that's a lot of money that flows into that country. The cartels fund a lot of politicians there. But Mexico even has a strong border on their southern border. They are strongly against illegal immigration. So this whole idea that a wall, I saw on Facebook today, people were posting this today. You remember when, I wasn't alive, but do you remember when John F. Kennedy spoke in front of the Berlin Wall?
Sure.
And talked about how, a country that needs to build a wall to keep people in isn't a free country and all that stuff? People were posting that on Facebook today, comparing it to the wall we would build on Mexico.
Yeah.
And saying, well, look, Kennedy said a wall is un-American. Except there's a complete difference in that. That wall kept people in. It wasn't meant to keep people out.
Right.
Because people hated it there. They wanted to leave, and they had to find a way to keep people in. And by the way, the wall actually, unfortunately, it's a bad thing, but the wall worked. It kept most people in that country, unfortunately. So actually, when you think about it, that's actually another example of the wall.
Took almost 30 years for it to come down.
Yeah.
Speaking of Mexico having a wall on their southern border, look what happened to that Marine who just drifted into Mexico territory.
Oh, yeah, that's right. He got arrested for it.
He got in a slammer for 6 months. I mean, they didn't even send him back.
I know. And then, and nobody says, well, Mexico, they're not compassionate. Their immigration laws are unfounded. Look what they did. Nobody said that.
Right.
Nobody said that. Because we want cheap labor. Democrats want easy votes. There's a whole bunch of other reasons for it. Mexico wants the money. Mexico wants the drugs to come in here. Let's build the wall. I like it. Let's get this done. Let's get this one done. If Trump gets this done, I will become more of a fan of Trump. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. Next, we have the much beloved, much coveted, much anticipated Beyond Reason Trump Twitter update. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Yes, this is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. Don't forget to send me a friend request on Facebook. Just search Michael Yaffee. Send me a friend request, and I will accept it. Before I get into the much-anticipated Trump Twitter update, I just was thinking about the whole idea of tariffs and protectionism and all that. And I would encourage people to read, there's a little pamphlet out there you can find online. It's called iPencil. And it was something that Milton Friedman put out there a lot as well. And what it talks about is all the complicated steps that goes into manufacturing something as simple as a pencil. We don't think about all the different things that go into that. You have to cut down the tree from one person, then you have to get the resources from another person, and then you have to put it together and get the lead from another place, and then it's a complicated process. And the whole point of the pamphlet was to show people why government intervention is a terrible idea, because there's no way that a government can control all these different things in a marketplace.
But they want to.
Yeah, but they want to. Exactly. They want to control it, but there's no way they can do it successfully with all these different parts and know exactly how everything works. And I say that in terms of protectionism because, we think of, products coming across the border. Well, it's more complicated than that because, for instance, a car company. There are lots of plants in the U.S. from different car companies, and they build it here, but some of the parts they might get from Mexico. Some of the parts they might get from Japan, It comes from all these different places, and then they bring it here and build it. And it goes the other way. We export a lot of things to other countries, and it's the same way. So if you're a consumer and you're going to buy a car, and all of a sudden we add all these tax on these different parts, you're not realizing, you're not thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to get that car because this part was from Mexico or whatever. All you're seeing is the price increase. That's all you're seeing. So you're just going to want to go where it's cheaper. But if there's nowhere else that's cheaper, then competition is hurt in the big run of things. So when we think of it simplistically, that we're just getting, guacamole from Mexico or something, and we just get that from Mexico and we'll charge a tax on that and that'll be good. But that's not really how it works. A lot of times we get the avocados from Mexico, but we make the guacamole here, and we get other products that goes into the guacamole here. And by just adding this tax for that one part, for that one little thing as a part of the product, all it does is raise the price. So all you're going to see is consumers with higher prices, and they're not going to understand why. They're not going to think about, oh, well, this is good for America, and we'll get it from America. It's so much more complicated than that. So I would look for that iPencil thing and look at it, and why government intervention in the marketplace and more taxes in the marketplace, because the tariff's essentially a tax, is not good for the marketplace. Okay, Tom Benson, get ready, because it is that time.
I'm a tweet with a bird in a deodorant cage. Tweet is my name, but I don't know my age. I don't have to worry, and that is that. I'm safe in here from that old putty cat.
Yes, it is the Beyond Reason Trump Twitter update. We haven't done this in a little while, and I thought we have to bring back the Beyond Reason Trump Twitter update. So, Tom Benson, how far should I go back? What do you think? 2 days? 1 day?
Go back and start with the best one.
The best one, okay.
All right.
There's not as much controversial ones in the past couple of days. I'm very disappointed. I purposely don't look at these before I do this because I want to be shocked, and I'm just looking back, and it's not as controversial. But this was probably the most controversial one of the past couple of days. 2 days ago, Donald Trump, he was obviously watching Fox News because they were reporting on this. He said, if Chicago doesn't fix the horrible carnage going on, 228 shootings in 2017 with 42 killings, up 24% from 2016, I will send in the feds. Obviously, he's just reacting. What exactly that means, I'm not exactly sure. You really can't just send in the feds. It's a local problem.
He would have to nationalize the National Guard in
Right.
Illinois.
Exactly. I think, I don't remember in history when that's been done. I was thinking of Eisenhower, but Eisenhower sent in the 101st.
Yeah, that was the school integration in Montgomery, Alabama, back in 57, I think.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I'll get into it. I got a comment on Facebook. I'll get into that a little later. But yeah, so not exactly sure how we would do that. Usually, the local government have to invite the feds in. They have to, approve it. The feds can't just go in. So whatever that means, we'll find out. It'll probably be more realistic when it actually happens, like a lot of things with Trump. He says it, and then we actually have a policy. The policy's a little bit more realistic. Okay, next thing he said, big day planned on national security tomorrow. Okay, that was a couple of days ago, so we remember that. Here's one, very controversial. I will be asking for a major investigation into voter fraud, including those registered to vote in 2 states, those who are illegal, and even those registered to vote who are dead, and many for a long time. Depending on results, we will strengthen up voting procedures. So that's obviously in reaction to saying 3 million voters, apparently illegal voters, voted for Hillary, and that's the only reason Hillary won. Not a lot of evidence to support that.
Not yet.
Not yet. Now, Bud actually passed this on to me. There is a story out there that the Washington Times had, but it was someone who did a research on this, and they concluded, let's see, It was done, the research was done. Political scientist Jesse Richmond of the Old Dominion University in Virginia has worked with colleagues to produce groundbreaking research on non-citizen voting. And he posted a blog in response to Mr. Trump's assertion. What he found was that 834,381 net votes from illegals, which is not 3 million. And he points out that the 3 million number's unfounded. There isn't any evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
But over 800,000 illegal votes is a lot.
Yeah.
So this is what I predict. What's probably going to happen is the 3 million will never be proved. But you'll have stuff like this where you'll see voter fraud out there, in the hundreds of thousands. And Trump will point to that. Sure. And at least he'll probably say, at least I brought attention to this.
Right. But
I brought attention to this. And because of my statements, we're looking into this and we're going to crack down on this. And even though he'll never be proven right on his original statement, it will be kind of taking credit for it and kind of
And there were 3 million votes I didn't get, so that must have been illegal.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of the prediction that I'm getting from that. Okay, what else is on his Twitter? He said a couple days ago that he will be making a Supreme Court pick on Thursday of next week. Has a lot of posts about things like, this is what I did today. I did an interview. We'll skip over some of that. We'll go to today. Let's see what he said today. Let's see. Well, this is, he said this a day ago, which is very interesting. He said, ungrateful traitor, put traitor in all caps, of course, Chelsea Manning, who should never have been released from prison, is now calling President Obama a week later. Terrible! Exclamation point. A lot of people will like that one. Here's another one from a day ago. The U.S. has a $60 billion trade deficit with Mexico. It has been a one-sided deal from the beginning of NAFTA with massive numbers of jobs and companies lost. If Mexico is unwilling to pay for the badly needed wall, then it would be better to cancel the upcoming meeting. Now, apparently they talked on the phone today and kind of worked things out, but the president of Mexico did cancel the meeting. They talked on the phone. They said they're not going to say all this stuff in public. They're going to work things out, but we'll see what happens. Okay.
Well, part of the problem with the president of Mexico is he's in an election either this year or next year.
Oh, yeah.
And he's way down in the polls.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So he's trying to be tough against Trump to get his poll numbers.
Right. I think he's got less than 20% approval rate.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. This is from 11 hours ago. He says, look forward to seeing final results of vote stand. Greg Phillips and crew say at least 3 million votes were illegal. Must do better. So that'll be interesting when that comes out. And then he said this today. He said, the March for Life is so important to all of you marching. You have my full support. And I could not agree more. I think that is awesome. A couple other things he posted, but and we'll end with that one. A lot of it's just like, this is what I did today. Congratulations to this cabinet member. So that has been the Beyond Reason Twitter update.
I'm a tweet with a bird in a deodorant cage. Tweet is my name, but I don't know my age. I don't have to worry, and that is that. I'm safe in here from that old putty cat.
This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is the angel on your right shoulder telling you the right thing to do in a world that tells you a lot of beyond reason things to do. How was that, Tom Benson? I think that's good. He likes it. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We have Tom Benson producing. So earlier, and this always starts controversy when I bring this up, and I'm not the only conservative saying this. There's a lot of conservatives out there saying what I'm saying, that protectionism is not a good idea. But earlier I gave the example of, say we added the tax to Mexico to now I'm getting show ideas of music, intro music you should play on the text line, by the way, Tom Benson. But so I gave the example of avocados. and how, protectionism can be very complicated because we might make the guacamole here, but we get the avocados from Mexico. So if we tax that, the price of avocados will go up, and that price will just be passed on to the consumer, and the consumer's not going to know, all the intricacies and all that. They're just going to see the prices go up, and that's going to hurt the economy overall. Well, someone commented, and he said on Facebook Live, you can friend me on Facebook, and I don't mind if you disagree. It's fine. A lot of people do. They said, but to continue your analogy, produced buyers may decide to switch to another supplier. So he said, for example, one that is a domestic. Avocados are not only manufactured in Mexico. The main place in the United States where most avocados are grown is Fallbrook, California, which is a northern suburb of San Diego. So the price goes up for avocados grown in Mexico, and who says the supplier isn't going to just go to the American? And this is the theory. That's the whole theory of protectionism. That's what they say. This will force you to buy American over Mexico. Here's my problem with that. The first problem is, why is the government dictating to my business where I should buy from? Because that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to force you to buy. That's exactly what they want you to do. They're trying to force you to buy American instead of Mexico, even though if Mexico would be cheaper for you, they're trying to say with government action, with government taxes, the government does this all the time. It's like when they tax soda, they try to force you not to drink soda because they want to tax it. It's the same thing. It's the government manipulating the marketplace. And as a limited government conservative, I have a problem with that. But here's the other thing I would address with this. Ask yourself, why didn't that company buy from, that American manufacturer in the first place? Like, why didn't they buy avocados from California in the first place? Why did they not do that? If it's there, why not buy that instead of Mexico? Well, the answer is obvious. It's cheaper to buy in Mexico for many different reasons. And there's a lot of, controversy out there. There's a lot of regulations in California, for instance, that make it very expensive to do stuff there compared to Mexico as well. So if you're buying in Mexico, it's cheaper. If you're forcing to buy in California, it's going to be more expensive. So they might switch, because if they put a tax on Mexican goods imported, they might very well switch to that American company. But it's still going to be more expensive for the consumer, because that's the whole reason they didn't buy from California in the first place, is because it was more expensive. Now, the whole theory is it will create more jobs, and then there'll be more spending money in the consumer economy and all that stuff. But the evidence has showed that that hasn't happened. They might just sell less guacamole. That's another possibility. Now, he just commented and he said to fund the wall, and that's fine. It could very well fund the wall that way if you add that tax. But then you go to the other point I was making, where that could pay for the wall. Now, if less people are buying goods from Mexico, then they're going to get less tax revenue than they thought. So will they have enough money to fund the wall if they're getting less tax revenue? This is what I'm saying. This is why it gets complicated when a government gets involved in little parts of the economy like this, because it doesn't work that way. It's complicated. That's why the free market is much better at doing these things. But it will fund the wall. It could fund the wall. I think it probably would fund the wall. But that's not Mexico paying for it, is my point. Mexico would not be paying that. You would be paying for it. I would be paying for it. Whoever's buying the products here would be paying for it. So how do we get more manufacturing back here? Well, to me, the answer is obvious. Make it so beneficial to move your business to America with low taxes and low regulations that you will want to be here, because companies want to be here. There are so many benefits. If you didn't have all the regulations and the high taxes and the complicated tax code, there's actually a lot of benefits to manufacturing in here, and there's actually still a lot of manufacturing in this country. The technology is better here. The workers sometimes are more expensive, but that can be better here. The legal system is better here, so you can protect your places better. You can protect your jobs better. You can protect your people better. The banking system is more stable here. So there are a lot of reasons to do it, but we have to make it more beneficial for them to do that. But that's my take. I know a lot of people. I know I'm never going to win this argument with a lot of Trump supporters. That's fine. But I just have to be honest with you. This is Beyond Reason Radio. We covered a lot in the show. If you missed any of the show, check out the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Just go to Beyond Reason Radio on iHeartRadio or download the Beyond Reason Radio app. This is Michael Yaffee. Support life. Support the March for Life. Support the pro-life movement today. The Bible says you were crafted in the womb by God. Don't forget that. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'll catch you guys next time.